Hi everyone, I'm Enrique, Senior Vice President of Strategy here at Savient. And today I want to talk about glass wings. Yes, this was a project launched not too long ago, April 7th, by Anthropic. And you know me, you know how much I like analogies. And I got curious when I saw that name, what they meant by that name is that the transparency and the visibility of those wings, they were there to represent how vulnerabilities are sometimes invisible and transparent. We're using software. We don't expect that software to fail. And that was one of the reasons. The other one is apparently the butterfly with this type of glass wing. Those are super resistant. So that's another part as well of their marketing choice of that name for the initiative, which is the resilience, the security that those wings represent. Hype or not, we can argue here, but it is a very clever choice of words, but also a clever and scary type of proposition here. The whole idea behind this initiative was that the fear of this model that Anthropic was launching was too scary for the world to consume, and they said, you know what, we're not going to be launching this. You could argue maybe my neighbor could say, I have this amazing product, but I will not show it to you because it's too good. It's too good for society, or it's too strong, or you can't handle it. That elevates the hype, of course. And I think there is an element here of truth in that. I think it does scare us a little bit of what could happen in this situation. And not only that, it's AI getting out of control, but there are multiple forces reshaping the way identity is working in 2026 and 2027. This whole excitement about identities and AI and etc., right? But specifically about AI, the pessimism that we see today about the hype that goes very high, the expectations are super high on AI projects, and statistics show that not a lot of AI projects return the ROI that we expect. Many companies rolled back on AI because of that. So similar to Gartner hype cycles, right? So just after we hit that peak of inflated expectations, we go through that valley of pessimism. And I think we're going through that right now. This project, Glasswing, is an example of people fearing, right? We're scared about what could go wrong with AI going after our jobs. And that added by the whole volatility that we see in the world. Geopolitical tensions and all this uncertainty, what's going to happen in the future, stock markets and etc., supply of oil, and that compounds, right, with this all uncertainty and risks of AI adoption, plus the blind spots when we think of AI growing, spreading itself. It is a very interesting, perhaps very, very, very fast changes than we saw in the previous waves of cloud and etc. The visibility gap created by these initiatives are perhaps just compounding and getting bigger as well. When we look at 20 years, 25 years since cloud was invented, I think, the first cloud company, Salesforce, was invented in the year 2000. So it's close to 26 years that cloud is around. How many non-human identities, machine IDs, were created just for run cloud, API keys, OAuth tokens. Now we have those AI agents as well. So the visibility gap is widening because of it. The disinformation security, not only deepfakes, you may have seen announcements of OpenAI shutting down the video services of Sora because of concerns on deepfakes and lawsuits. But more than that, when we look at the necessity to authenticate and authorize AI itself, we need to go one step above the traditional identity controls of policy-based authentication, policy-based authorization. Intent-based becomes another challenge. How can we make sure that when we ask an AI bot to help us clean up our inbox, and they have access to our inbox, the bot is not erasing all emails, right? Not because the bot has access to our inbox, but the intent is, no, I want you to organize this, not necessarily delete stuff. So intent is going to be a big thing as well, shaping identity. And this combination of hybrid intelligence and artificial intelligence, not very different of what we saw in hybrid cloud, for example, a mix of on-prem, private clouds, public clouds. There's a lot to think about here of acronyms I hear, like HIL, or human in the loop, or HITL. I think that's very wrong. If you think about the human in the loop, it sounds like a very tiny bit portion of that depends on humans. So we're going to see that more and more, that the control plane, right? So I want to see if we can get humans in the control plane versus humans being in the loop. But right now, there's this forces pulling in different directions and say, no, they need to approve everything. So are we going to be replying to AI requests, or is it us that control AI? So this type of humans and AI agents and AI intelligence, artificial intelligence working together in a hybrid mode, I think is perhaps one of the ways that are going to be reshaping identity as well. And when we think about reshaping of identity, many years ago, we've been claiming or clamoring for identity to have a seat in the table. When we think about what we wish for, we got to be very careful for what we got, because we not only got a seat in the table, we got the biggest seat in that table. You may be familiar with a podcast called Identity at the Center, and that's where it is today. And that's another phrase I hear a lot, identity as the new perimeter, which I strongly disagree. If you think about identity the way it is in this picture here, but also in our lives, in discussions with clients that we have every day, identity is in the center. The same way that humans are in the control plane of this new era, identity is in the center of this. And it's providing this context information to endpoint security, to data security, to network security, to cloud security. All those other disciplines in cybersecurity remain crucial, super important in this new era of AI. However, this exchange, interoperability of identity systems with the other domains, traditional domains of cybersecurity, will dictate the success or failure of approaches for AI more specifically. So the whole concept of the perimeter, I don't think we even be talking about perimeter. For me, it doesn't make sense to talk about a perimeter anymore. And what makes sense to talk about is this here. It's the pressure that we hear clients and their employees, engineering teams, the pressure they feel to adopt AI in a super fast way. Adopting AI quicker than perhaps their fears of not moving. So how can we make this balance work out? This in one side, we want to outpace our competition. When I say us, the industry. The industry is adopting AI very quickly. So if we don't adopt AI, we may be losing some ground here. But if we adopt AI the wrong way, also it's a very risky proposition. We have to roll back those projects. We have to, do that again. So how can we balance this optimization of chaos, all this hype of inflated expectation, some disappointments with AI, with the need of fast adoption? One way that we can start to think about this problem is to understand that AI is not just an app that runs on our phones. It's not just a tool. It's not just a co-pilot asking you or you ask and you have a conversation with. AI is this abstraction layer. And talking about the waves that we saw, I gave a few examples here, right? Cloud, 25-year-old wave. Before that, there was data centers. Before that, there was mainframes. So decades and decades of waves and changes. This is just another one. And that's what I tell my clients and my friends. When we look at AI, if we are observing the transitions that we went through in technology, AI is another wave. And I can promise you, it's not going to be the last wave. So we got to understand that this is an abstraction layer that sits on top a layer that already exists. So cloud is not going away. AI runs on top of it. It uses and it needs all these API calls, all these translations from MCP to API, the keys, the authentication methods. Those are very familiar. Those are not changing overnight. So understanding this abstraction layer is going to be super important. And going back to the idea of what I mentioned about the human in the loop, a much better approach here is to think about human in the control plane. And when I think about that is an operating system for resilience in this world of AI. And there are 3 steps to it. The first one is that visibility pillar of this control plane. The visibility is about discovering all the sanctioned AI, the sanctioned identities that exist, but also the shadow ones, the ones that we don't know where they are, and calculating the risk of those entities. That's the first pillar, the visibility one. Then there's adaptability. Adaptability is all about responding to what you find, to what you discover, to remediate things, control the life cycle, the ownership of that. Provisioning, deprovisioning, the whole idea of governance, right? And adapt it to changes that you have discovered. And last is trust. So adaptability leads to that last pillar of trust, ensuring and enforcing, for example, with intent, an intent-based authorization of what AI is supposed to do or not to do. And knowing about this control plane, I want to talk real quick about the top trends that we're seeing out there in the market. When we talk to our clients, when we talk to leaders, when we talk to practitioners in identity, those are the top trends that jump into our forefront and our attention. There are 5 things I want to talk about. Platformization 2.0. 2025 was a year perhaps of record M&A. I think it was over $25 billion of investment in just companies acquiring other companies with this whole intent of improving visibility. So think of the 3 pillars of the control plane. Platformization is a big one. When you see IGA and PAM converging the way Savient does, for example, this is a trend that is not only happening in identity, but in cybersecurity as a whole. My suggestion here in terms of platformization 2.0, which is different from the first generation of platformization, we saw like suites of identity products, is that we got to pick and choose the convergence and the unification of clusters of solution that makes sense to you. So think about this, IGA and PAM, as I mentioned. That, if you ask me as a former analyst at Gartner and now at Savient, it just makes sense. It has no meaning for having IGA and PAM as separate silos. We're losing the opportunity of an integrated way of visualizing data, but also interoperability between data of what's privileged, what's non-privileged. Now, if you think of, for example, detection response for endpoints, converging with XDR, converging with SIEM, that makes a lot of sense as well. So my suggestion here is thinking about those clusters when we think about platformization. The second trend here is MCP and MCP servers. I don't remember last time a protocol spread with the quick and the speed of MCP. If you are doing identity for as long as I have, you see how many failed protocols were there. So MCP, what was interesting about that is Anthropic themselves, when they launched this protocol, and this is all about adaptability, by the way, the second pillar. They said, well, you know what? You, developer, you are in charge of controlling the security of MCP and also the identity controls of MCP. So we are building apps, we're building code, and we're using MCP. We are in charge of that. And researchers found a lot of vulnerabilities in that protocol because that shared responsibility relies with the user. So my suggestion here with MCP is that we cannot make the same mistakes we made with API in the cloud era. In the cloud era, 25 years ago, 26 years ago, we create a lot of API keys that are static, and now it's very hard to maintain that. So as we build apps using MCP, we got to make sure that the MCP keys, the authentication keys that we use for MCP are modern, and they're not something that's going to be a hard thing for us to manage in the future. Which leads us to the next topic, which is modern machine identity and access management. The modern machine, and an emphasis here in the word modern, because yes, there are a lot of machine identities everywhere. The explosion of that, people saying it's 80 to 1, it's 100 to 1, it is crazy. But the same thing that happened with cloud, right? And MCP, same thing. We don't want to propagate that. So the first call to action here is to contain the problem. So I remember a friend of mine, a former colleague at Gartner, he used this analogy of asbestos, right? We got to stop building houses with asbestos. So we got to stop building new apps, new AI apps, agents using static type of credentials or static legacy machine identities. So we got to use protocols and controls like SPIFFE, for example, or Spire, that are secretless type of approaches for modern machine identity. The next one, visibility intelligence. Of course, it's all about the pillar of visibility. Some may call that IVIP, Identity Visibility and Intelligence Platforms, ISPM. It's all about seeing what you can manage, right? Understanding where things are. That was not a problem in the workforce days of managing identities because you knew employees were coming from HR or they're coming from other employee records or contractor vendor records and stuff like that. Or even clients. They have repositories, CRM systems where we have an idea where those are coming from. When we think about visibility intelligence in the era of AI, it's a much bigger priority because those things can exist anywhere. Machines can multiply, and we saw that in those other two prior trends here of 2026. So visibility and intelligence, ISPM, it's a big one. The last one is AI governance. And when we think about AI governance, there's a lot of different interpretations of what that means. That means that the same way that we have humans, we have privileged users, we have external users, contractors, we have NHIs, we got to bring those AI identities, those non-human identities as part of your identity governance program. So the same way that we control life cycle, the enforcement, and the visibility of those elements from a human standpoint, we got to bring that right now. Not next year, this year. We got to create this program that embraces all kinds of identities. I said this another day. If a company is launching an AI program, but they can't govern those AI identities at the same time, maybe they're not ready to launch AI at all. So with that, I would like to dive deeper on these topics. There's a lot we can see more about the identity control plane for AI at Savient.com at our website. And you can't miss this. We'll be at Identiverse. So please come and meet with us. I can't wait to see you there at Identiverse and talk more by our Savient booth and discuss the benefits of the identity control plane for AI so we all can adopt AI without fear. See you there. Thank you.